Pain can be blocked, healing can be enhanced, malignant tumors can apparently be suppressed and ultimately destroyed. Okay, so before we get into that, I want to go over the first part of the document, which is the introduction. The author of the document really wants to get into the other similar techniques so that we have a very good understanding in how it all works. And what we're talking about is the gateway experience, which is basically expanding your consciousness beyond your physical body and possibly tapping into other planes of existence, which, yes, tapping into other dimensions. But first, he says we need to take a look at hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback. And I know we went over this in the first video, or like the first or second video. So this is a deep dive into those three techniques so we know how it works within the brain. Okay, so if you're following along, I'm going to have the link to the document in the description so that I don't want to have to read everything because it can get long and boring. Instead, what I'm going to do is just explain each section. One more thing, if you see me looking off screen, I'm just looking at my notes. So the second section, number 2, is hypnosis. And so according to the biomedical models of Isaac Benthoff, and in case you don't know who Isaac Benthoff is, he wrote this book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, on the mechanics of consciousness. This is heavily referenced in the CIA document. Aside from that, I have tons of videos on this book on all my pages. In any case, he's not just a whatever guy. He was actually an engineer and an inventor. And for him, hypnosis was basically a hack in the sense that hypnosis allows for certain things to slip by when most of the time things are blocked. So think of it as a security guard at its post, where the left hemisphere of the brain is the security guard and the right side is where everything is trying to get to. So during hypnosis, the left side kind of goes dormant, and it's usually responsible for like labeling things and, you know, stopping and just being like, whoa, what is this? We need to know what this is before it gets to the right side of the brain. So during hypnosis, the left side kind of goes dormant, and whatever suggestions you're feeding to it can just slip through to the right side of the brain. And so then the right side of the brain thinks, hey, all these things are real, which is why it was used for, let's say, people who wanted to stop smoking. If you think back, it was just fed suggestions and the right side of the brain would just accept it without anything being filtered. And so it would feed it suggestions kind of like, you know, you don't need to smoke, you don't want to smoke. And then the right side of the brain just kind of accepts it as fact. And then I guess it was easier for people to stop smoking because it was a suggestion that the right side of your brain accepted and took as truth. So all in all, hypnosis is a way of bypassing the brain's logic filter and accessing your operating system directly. Okay, so the third section is transcendental meditation. And again, we went over this in the first video, but we're going to get a little deeper into it. So what happens with transcendental meditation, it's very different than traditional meditation, because traditional meditation, you're trying to focus on something and you're trying to get back to your awareness, to the present. You're focusing on your breathing. You're really trying to get back to your awareness. But transcendental meditation takes you, from what I understand how people describe it, because I've never done it, is it gets you to a place beyond your physical body. In other words, it almost seems like you become a ball of energy in just a blank field. So you're going beyond your physical body. You're no longer relating with your heartbeat or your breathing or any thoughts that are coming through. You're going beyond, you're expanding your consciousness, and you actually just sit in consciousness where you are just nothing but consciousness. That's the best way I can relay how it's been described. So just imagine being a blip of energy somewhere, and that is all you feel like you are at the moment. And so people describe this as a state of bliss. Okay, so I'm going to read from my notes, because the way Isaac Benthoff describes this is, the way it works is that it creates acoustical standing waves in the ventricles of the brain. So the ventricles of the brain are these narrow fluid-filled spaces. And so he says that the waves are triggered by your heartbeat rhythm, and that usually happens when you meditate for long periods of time. And when that happens, it's almost like light switches being turned on in your brain. And Bentov connects this to the Kundalini experience, which is that rising flow of energy from the bottom of your spine all the way up. And that state of bliss that people describe, he says, is really just your own brain stimulating its pleasure centers. So it's almost as if your consciousness is just lighting up all the wiring in it. And that's where you get that euphoric feeling. And what's crazy is that he says that you can actually get into this state without that transcendental meditation. You can actually feel that euphoric bliss that they talk about. So he says you don't really have to meditate or anything. Just being exposed to vibrations between 4 and 7 hertz over and over again might trigger the same effect. He says that things like riding in a car or even sitting next to a vent that hums at that frequency range can actually get you there the same as transcendental meditation. So anyone who's neurologically sensitive to frequencies like that can actually do this over and over again without having years of meditation experience. And by the way, the transcendental meditation, if you're following along, has these diagrams of a brain to help you understand it better if you want to see the inner workings of it. But if you read it alongside section 3, which is the transcendental meditation, then you'll have more of an understanding. So we're going to get into section 4 now, which is biofeedback. And that's probably the one that's the most interesting, the easier one to understand. Okay, so again, I'm going to read from my notes. The biofeedback starts by training your left hemisphere, the logical, self-aware, analytical side of your brain, to visualize a desired outcome. So we are talking about visualization. So this is something that a lot of us have practiced. Some deliberately, sometimes we visualize by accident when we're not even trying. So this teaches you how to recognize the feeling that comes when your right brain starts to carry out the outcome of the visualization. So you'll have real-time feedback on whether or not your visualization is working through devices like digital thermometers that are attached to you, as well as brainwave monitors. So I'm going to read a couple lines directly from the CIA document because it's pretty self-explanatory. For example, if the subject wishes to increase the circulation in the left leg in order to speed up healing, he may concentrate with his left brain on achieving the result while carefully monitoring the digital thermometer connected to the left leg. When the concentrated effort begins to achieve success, the digital thermometer will register an increase in the temperature of the left leg. At that point, the subject can mentally, with the left brain, associate the sensations experienced with the result achieved and can begin to emphasize by memory recall the same process to cause its strengthening by affirmation and repetition. So basically, you're creating a visualization loop where you're concentrating on healing your leg, you're visualizing sending all these different components that will help heal your leg faster. And in real time, you're seeing the temperature of the thermometer rise. And so you're thinking, whoa, this is working. And so you just keep trying, and it actually helps eliminate the doubt that you had that it would work to begin with. And it's just affirming that it is working. And basically, that's how you strengthen your belief in that visualization. And so it's basically you repeat it, you focus again, you recall the feeling, and now you're starting to create this neural pathway that lets you do it more easily the next time. So you're basically training your brain to kind of follow your command. So the left side of your brain is like the teacher, and the right side of your brain performs the outcomes. And they're basically like, let's say, blocking pain or enhancing healing. And so, yeah. So at the beginning of this video, we talked about malignant tumors. Where it said that it may be suppressed or destroyed, reading directly from the CIA document. And let me actually read that right now. So where I left off before is where I'll pick up, because I'll read the last part of the sentence where it says, the same process to cause its strengthening by affirmation and repetition. The next line reads, in this way, pain can be blocked, healing can be enhanced, malignant tumors can apparently be suppressed and ultimately destroyed. The body's pleasure centers can be stimulated, and a variety of specific psychological results may be achieved. That is reading directly from the CIA document. So even though that was mentioned just in passing, because that is the only mention of this in this document, because this document is basically about astral projection. Okay, so we're going to move on to section 5 called Gateway and Hemisync. So here he starts to go into what the technique actually involves and what it does. And I'm going to read a portion of this and then I'll explain it. Okay, it reads, fundamentally, the Gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. Okay, so the way it brings about that enhanced strength and focus is by syncing up both the left and right hemispheres. So think of it as the left hemisphere is a guitar player and the right hemisphere is a singer. And they're both singing different songs. One is upbeat and the other one is a slow acoustic song that they're playing. And it doesn't match up, right? And it just sounds like this jumbled mess. But when they sync up and they start singing and playing the same song, it sounds like the most beautiful song ever. They're in harmony, it's in sync. That harmony is what hemisync is. And so both sides of the brain are doing the same thing at the same time. And that's where the enhanced focus and strength comes from. So as it's described in the document, the hemisync is a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. Although hemisync seems to be rather rare and of only short duration in ordinary human consciousness, audio techniques developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain hemisync with the Institute's basic focus tapes. So although getting your brainwaves to sync up is rare, and even if you achieve that, you might not even last that long in it, Robert Monroe developed these focus tapes to help you achieve hemisync and stay in it for longer. And that's what they do at the Monroe Institute. Now, towards the bottom of this section, it says, there is a gradual increase in brainwave size, which is a measure of brain energy or power. So with this increase of brain energy and power, I will tell you what the multitude of people have experienced during this. First is the feeling of leaving your body. Some people have described it as dreaming while they're still awake and flying or floating above themselves where they see things happening and their physical body still below them. And we've all heard stories like this before, mostly during near-death experiences where people have died and then come back and they're able to describe what happened in either the room that they were in because they were seeing themselves from above or in another part of the hospital. So those are out-of-body experiences. So other experiences people have had is visiting other places without moving. So their consciousness is somewhere else. Again, this is like an out-of-body experience, but it's actually by thought alone, they're able to go to a different city or a different country or a different part of this world, but their body is still at the Monroe Institute, right? And so we've come to know this as remote viewing. So the travel isn't just from here to the store. The travel is somewhere far away. Like I said, maybe other countries, other cities, places that they haven't been to in a long time, and even outer space. Other people say they have been able to see the past or the future. So because this experience, this gateway experience, is said to move your consciousness beyond time and space, people have felt like they have seen the past, the present, and the future all at the same time, all things happening. So some of them describe it as a release from the constraint of time. And so they don't feel bound by the time that we experience. And so they're able to see things that have happened either in their past or just history in general, something that they didn't experience, and also possibilities for the future. And these things that they describe, that they see, is just they get through like flashes of images in their mind. So other people say that during this experience, they felt super connected to the universe or to a higher consciousness or higher self. So they come back having a deeper meaning to life. They come back with their own purpose and just understanding how connected everything is. And other people say they have experienced an overwhelming amount of joy and love and peace. So, in this state of astral projection, they've actually felt this indescribable sense of safety and freedom. So, with this expansion of consciousness, they're just in a completely different realm where they're not bound by worries and bills and things like that. And so it's just an immense freedom and safety that they feel just somewhere out in the universe. And so those are the different things that people have described during this hemisync experience. And so that's where I'm going to leave it off for now. Don't forget to subscribe so that we can continue going over this.